There was a moment, perhaps you remember it, when the ground beneath your certainty cracked open, not with a thunderous roar, but with the quiet terror of a breath held too long. You were standing in your kitchen, or driving home from work, or staring at a message on your phone that shouldn't exist, and suddenly the scaffolding that held your reality together collapsed. What if I told you this moment wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough? That the vertigo you felt wasn't madness, but the first honest sensation you've had in years. The psychologist Carl Jung once warned that people cannot stand too much reality. But what happens when reality finds you anyway? When the stories you've been told about yourself, about success, about love, about purpose, reveal themselves as elegant fabrications. What if your suffering isn't yours, but something you inherited silently? A legacy of lies wrapped in love, protection, and good intentions. A beautiful prison built cell by cell, year by year, belief by belief. You've felt it coming, haven't you? That growing dissonance between what you're told should fulfill you and what actually does. The exhaustion of maintaining a self that feels increasingly foreign. The suspicion that beneath your carefully constructed identity lies something wilder, truer, and infinitely more terrifying. You've been living in a blueprint drawn by someone else's hand. Your ambitions, photocopies of expectations, your fears, inherited like heirlooms too heavy to discard. The American dream, the good life, the path to happiness. These aren't discoveries, they're prescriptions, and you've been swallowing them without reading the side effects. Find your passion, they said. But they never mentioned how passion feels more like obsession when it's not truly yours. Work hard, they promised. But they never explained why fulfilling all their requirements still leaves you hollow. Follow your heart, they whispered. Yet somehow your heart always leads to destinations that look suspiciously like social media highlights. You've been wearing a mask so long it grew nerve endings. Now removing it feels like peeling away your own skin. This isn't just your struggle. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard saw this centuries ago, calling it the sickness unto death. Not physical death, but something more insidious, the slow suffocation of authentic existence under layers of conformity and self-deception. You feel it when you smile at conversations that mean nothing to you, when you pursue goals whose achievement leaves you numb, when you wake at 3 a.m. with your heart racing, not knowing why, but somehow knowing this isn't the life you were meant for. Your dreams have become calculated investments, your friendships, strategic alliances, your identity, a carefully curated portfolio. And in quiet moments, you wonder if anyone sees you or merely the projection you've perfected. Look at your bookshelf, your playlists, your search history. How much of what you consume simply reinforces what you already believe? The algorithm isn't manipulating you. It's reflecting you, a mirror showing not who you are, but what you've allowed yourself to become. The most insidious aspect of this trap? You built it yourself, brick by brick, choice by choice, compromise by compromise. Each time you said yes when you meant no. Each time you stayed silent when truth burned in your throat. Each time you accepted a smaller life to avoid the vertigo of possibility. Your body has been trying to tell you. That chronic pain that doctors can't explain, that fatigue no amount of sleep resolves, that nameless anxiety haunting ordinary moments. Your flesh remembers what your mind forgot, that you were born for authenticity, not adaptation. The invisible walls closing in aren't made of circumstance, they're made of belief. Beliefs about what's possible, what's permitted, what's safe, what others might think, what your survival requires. But these aren't facts, they're stories. Stories that were never yours to begin with. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a prophet of this very moment you're experiencing. He wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well the minds which are prevented from changing their opinions, they cease to be mind." Your old skin is dying. The beliefs that no longer serve you are peeling away, leaving you raw and exposed. James Hollis, Jungian analyst, speaks directly to this moment. What we have outgrown, we must relinquish, whatever the cost. The cost feels infinite right now. Your identity, your relationships, your place in the world. When the philosopher Plato described his allegory of the cave, prisoners mistaking shadows for reality, he wasn't writing about some abstract ancient dilemma. He was writing about this moment, your moment. When you turn away from the shadows and face the blinding light of what is, the silence that follows is deafening, isn't it? The space between what you thought was true and what you now know. Albert Camus understood this when he wrote about the absurd, that gulf between our search for meaning and the universe's indifference. He said that facing this truth requires a special kind of courage. The realization that life is absurd cannot be an end, but only a beginning. Your beginning starts now, in the ruins of certainty. Among the debris of should-haves and must-bes and always-will-bes that suddenly aren't. Soren Kierkegaard described this moment as standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into possibility. The vertigo you feel isn't fear of falling, it's fear of jumping. Carl Jung knew this territory intimately. He called it the night sea journey, the dissolution of the conscious self and its certainties, a necessary descent into chaos before genuine rebirth. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, he warned. The pain you feel now isn't punishment, it's emergence. The philosopher Martin Buber spoke of two ways of relating, I-it and I-thou. In the I-it relation, everything is an object, including yourself, something to be categorized, used, manipulated. But in I-thou encounters, true presence emerges. Your disillusionment is an invitation to move from an I-it existence to an I-thou awakening. This code has always been hidden in plain sight. In the poetry that moved you beyond reason. In the music that brought tears you couldn't explain. In the moments of unexpected beauty that momentarily shattered your certainties. Your soul has been leaving breadcrumbs all along, guiding you back to authenticity. In psychology, this shattering is known as cognitive dissonance, the mental stress of holding contradictory beliefs. But that clinical term doesn't capture the existential earthquake you're experiencing. Consider the research of Dr. Jung who studied people who left cults or totalistic belief systems. The subjects described not just confusion, but a profound epistemological shock, a rupture in how they knew what they knew. One former member described it as having the operating system of your mind completely erased and having to build a new one from scratch. Does that sound familiar? Or consider the cultural phenomenon of red pilling, borrowed from the Matrix, that moment when illusion dissolves. The irony is that this concept itself has become a script, a new narrative to replace the old. Beware of trading one prison for another. A more authentic parallel comes from anthropologist Joseph Campbell's work on initiation rites. In traditional societies, the death of old identity wasn't just allowed, it was required for maturation. The collapse of your worldview isn't a malfunction, it's an initiation. The more you heal from false narratives, the more alone you feel. That's not failure, it's freedom. The isolation isn't abandonment, it's the necessary solitude of rebirth. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai, your reason for being. What happens when you realize your ikigai was manufactured by market forces, family expectations, and algorithmic suggestions? You're left in the wilderness of genuine becoming. Consider the true story of Teal Swan, who escaped a childhood of ritual abuse only to discover that her very sense of self had been constructed through trauma. Her journey wasn't just about healing, it was about discovering who she was beneath the programming. Or look at the psychological study by Dr. Robert Lifton on thought reform and the psychology of totalism. He found that those who experience radical belief change go through stages eerily similar to grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. You're not losing your mind, you're mourning a reality that never was. The cultural phenomenon of spiritual awakening has been commercialized, packaged, and sold back to seekers, another script to follow. But the true awakening is messier, more personal, more difficult to capture in Instagram captions or TikTok wisdom. The more deeply you question, the fewer answers satisfy you. This isn't intellectual deficiency, it's intellectual integrity. Psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski called this positive disintegration, the necessary collapse of a personality built on external validation before the emergence of an authentic self. The anxiety, depression, and disorientation you're experiencing aren't symptoms of breakdown, but of breakthrough. Anthropologist Victor Turner described liminal spaces, thresholds between identities where old structures dissolve before new ones form. You're not lost, you're between, not broken, transitioning. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly without first becoming formless liquid in the chrysalis. Researchers studying near-death experiences report a common phenomenon: life review. People see their choices not through their own perspective, but through the impact these choices had on others. What if you didn't need to die to experience this clarity? What if disillusionment is life review for the living? Psychotherapist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl observed that those who survived the camps weren't necessarily the strongest physically, but those who found meaning even in suffering. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Your old why has dissolved. This isn't tragedy, it's opportunity. This awakening exacts a toll, doesn't it? The disorientation has physical weight. You feel it in your throat when someone asks, "What do you do?" And you no longer know how to answer. You feel it in your chest when you look at relationships built on mutual illusions, wondering if truth will strengthen or shatter them. You feel it in your stomach when you realize how much time you've invested in pursuits that now seem hollow. This is why joy feels suspicious to you now, why silence screams louder than pain. Your nervous system is recalibrating to reality without filters. Remember those nights you couldn't sleep, not from caffeine or stress, but from the quiet dread that your life was a performance in a play you never auditioned for. That wasn't neurosis. It was your authentic self sending distress signals through the static. Your romantic confusion makes perfect sense now. How could you truly love another when you were living someone else's version of yourself? The existential fatigue, the quiet panic in crowded rooms, these aren't symptoms of disorder. They're evidence of awakening. When you sit with friends discussing the future, nodding along to 5-year plans that sound like corporate mission statements, the disconnection you feel isn't rudeness, it's recognition. When holidays feel like elaborate performances rather than celebrations, when achievements feel like checking boxes rather than crossing thresholds, when intimacy feels like script reading rather than connection, you're not broken. You're seeing clearly for the first time. The loss of certainty affects everything. Food tastes different. Music hits differently. Your body feels simultaneously more yours and more strange than ever before. The world seems both more vivid and more surreal. Colors too bright, emotions too raw, connections too fragile. Long-forgotten memories resurface without warning. Random moments from childhood. Conversations you didn't realize were significant. Choices made at crossroads you didn't recognize as such at the time. Your mind is reprocessing your past through new awareness, rearranging the narrative. Dreams become more intense, more symbolic. Sleep eludes you, then ambushes you. Your appetite fluctuates wildly. Old addictions call to you, promising the comfort of numbness. This is your system in recalibration, not malfunction, but metamorphosis. Let's be clear about what's happening. The systems that shaped you, education, media, religion, family, they weren't malevolent conspiracies. They were mechanisms of social cohesion, perpetuated by people who themselves never questioned. Your teachers gave you the answers they were given. Your parents loved you with the love they understood. The culture offered you scripts that worked for someone, somewhere, sometime. But not for you. Not now. They told you success was a ladder, They never mentioned that reaching the top would still leave you halfway to fulfillment. They showed you how to be productive. They never taught you how to be present. They measured your worth in metrics, followers, dollars, square footage, never asking if you were whole. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity, about seeing the water you've been swimming in your entire life. Philosopher Alan Watts captured this perfectly. We seldom realize that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own, for we think in terms of languages and images which we did not invent, but which were given to us by our society. Your rage is justified, but direct it not at the messengers, direct it at the messages themselves. Not to destroy them entirely, but to sort through them like an archaeologist, saving what's valuable and discarding what's not. Consider how education taught you what to think, not how to think. How religion offered answers to prevent you from living the questions. How family passed down not just genes, but generational traumas disguised as wisdom. Think about how capitalism converted your deepest yearnings into purchase decisions. How technology transformed your attention from gift into commodity. How politics reduced complex human problems into tribal affiliations. They told you normalcy was the goal when normalcy is merely the average of dysfunction. They sold you security when the only true security is embracing uncertainty. This isn't conspiracy, it's machinery. Machinery you've been both product and operator of until this moment. The philosopher Michel Foucault understood how power shapes reality not primarily through force, but through knowledge, defining what's normal, what's deviant, what's possible, what's forbidden. Your awakening isn't just personal, it's political, a reclamation of the right to define your own reality. Psychologist R.D. Laing suggested that what we call normal is often a collective delusion, and that what society labels insanity might sometimes be the sane response to an insane world. Your disorientation might be the most appropriate response to the distortions you've been living within. Look at how language itself constrains perception. The words available to you limit the realities you can conceive. Depression becomes a chemical imbalance rather than a reasonable response to meaninglessness. Anxiety becomes disorder rather than intuition. Resistance becomes pathology rather than wisdom. The system doesn't need to be malicious to be limiting. Fish don't need a conspiracy to be trapped in water. They just need to forget that water exists. I won't offer you escape. There is none. What I offer instead is a new orientation to your disorientation. You are not broken. You are breaking open. This unraveling has purpose. The psychologist Roberto Assagioli called it spiritual emergency, a crisis that's also an opportunity. The emergency is also emergence. Here's your threshold moment. You can retreat back into comfortable illusions, patching the cracks in your former certainty with new distractions, new identities, new beliefs that aren't really yours. Or you can step through the doorway of doubt into the wilderness of authenticity. This isn't about finding new answers, it's about living the questions themselves. As Rilke wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them." Living without ready-made meaning isn't easy. Creating your own path never is. But consider the alternative. Returning to a life that your deepest self has already recognized as insufficient. What awaits beyond the shattering is neither certainty nor nihilism. It's something rarer. The chance to exist on your own terms, to create meaning rather than consume it. When you stop forcing yourself into containers too small for your spirit, you'll find that discomfort was never the problem. The problem was contortion. When you release the expectation that life should make sense according to someone else's logic, you'll discover a deeper order. Not the geometric precision of human design, but the fluid symmetry of natural growth. Look at your hands. Feel the pulse in your wrists. Remember that beneath all the conditioning, beyond all the programming, you are first and foremost a living creature, born not to fit systems but to express life. This turn inward isn't withdrawal, it's presence. Not detachment from reality, but deeper engagement with it. When you stop mistaking maps for territories, every moment becomes uncharted, terrifying, and wondrous. The first step, radical honesty, not just with others, but with yourself. Notice when you're performing rather than being, when you're reciting rather than speaking, when you're fulfilling expectations rather than expressing essence. The second step, radical acceptance. Not of limitations, but of reality. Not everything you believed was a lie. Discernment is crucial now. Some structures support, others constrain. Some stories illuminate, others blind. Your task isn't to destroy all meaning, but to create meaning that serves life rather than diminishes it. The third step, radical curiosity. Approach yourself as a mystery to be explored rather than a project to be fixed. What emerges when you stop trying to be who you think you should be? What voice speaks when you silence the chorus of shoulds? This awakening isn't just personal, it's ancestral. How many of your bloodline lived and died without ever questioning the narratives handed to them? You stand at the junction of their unasked questions. This channel is not for comfort, it's for remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. The philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of authenticity as our highest calling, to reclaim ourselves from the anonymous mass of social expectation. That reclamation is violent, disruptive, and necessary. What part of you did this awaken? What beliefs are you now watching dissolve? This community exists for those brave enough to speak their unraveling aloud. If you're ready to destroy your illusions, this is your home. Subscribe not for answers, but for company on the journey. Remember, what dies in this process is not you, but what was never you to begin with. The French philosopher Simone Weil once wrote, "To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul." Not rooted in false certainties, but in the honest ground of your own becoming. That ground is waiting for you now. It always has been. Perhaps you've spent years building a self you thought the world would accept, only to discover the world doesn't care, and the self you built is a stranger. Perhaps you've collected identities like trophies, partner, parent, professional, only to find that without them, you don't know who remains. Perhaps you've followed every instruction, checked every box, met every expectation, only to arrive at the destination and think, is this all? The ancients had a word for what you're experiencing, anagnorisis, the moment of recognition when a character discovers their true identity. This is your anagnorisis. This is your remembering. Consider that your disillusionment isn't just personal transformation, it's evolutionary necessity. In a world of mounting crises, ecological, political, existential, we need humans who see clearly more than we need humans who function smoothly. Consider that your awakening serves not just your own liberation, but the liberation of others. Your courage to question creates permission for others to question. Your willingness to live authentically creates space for others to do the same. Consider that what feels like isolation now might eventually reveal itself as initiation into a different kind of belonging, not the belonging of conformity, but the belonging of shared truth. Not connection based on collective fiction, but communion grounded in mutual recognition. Leave a comment below, sharing the moment when you first suspected everything you believed might be a lie. What tremor in your certainty became an earthquake? And if this descent into truth resonates with the part of you that's been whispering all along, subscribe. Not because you need more content, but because you need more company on this solitary path. Beyond Morpheus isn't just a channel name. It's an invitation to go beyond the dream maker, beyond the illusion weaver, beyond the comfortable sleep of unquestioned belief. The red pill or the blue pill was never the real choice. The real choice is this. Will you create yourself, or will you allow yourself to be created? The answer awaits in the silence after this video ends.